I'm going to open the meeting then. It is 8:04 and I would like to call the April 12th Whatcom County Public Utility District regular commission meeting to order. And this is our first hybrid meeting that we have done since 2020. So please be patient with any technical challenges. For those of you joining remotely, if you're having any issues, please raise your hand so that we can troubleshoot those. And I did just want to apologize. I am getting over a cold that I didn't want to share with everyone else. So one of the benefits of moving to this hybrid technology, which we are planning to offer indefinitely going forward so that people can join both remotely and in person. So we hope today goes really well. And I just wanted to say thank you to the technology team before we get started. So the first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So I was hoping that our in-person commissioners and staff could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I can lead that, Christine.
Wonderful.
Join.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. So are there any proposed changes to the agenda?
I have none.
Okay,
Mute.
great. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda then.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of meeting minutes from the regular meeting of March 22nd and the approval of claims for April 12th.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as it reads.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. The motion carries. Now let's move on to public comment. And Anne, can you help with that? It looks like we'll have both in person and online public comment potentially. So let's get started.
I don't see anybody with their hands raised.
Great. Yeah, neither do I.
And Anne may not be able to do it moving forward because she's
Okay.
in the actual commission room. If it's
Okay.
easy for you to see,
Hi.
Christine, that would be great.
I do not see anyone online.
Oh,
And
and-
Anne, is there anyone in the commission room that would like to do a public comment?
Yes, Mr. Perry has a comment.
Wonderful.
I just want to comment that I'm encouraged that you're getting back to normal with in-person meetings on it. So thank you, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Perry, and glad to have you. And just so the public knows, we do have a public comment period at the end of our meetings as well. But at this time, we will close public comment and move on to old business. And the first item under old business is the broadband program update. And that will be, do you want to kick that off, Chris?
Sure. So we've been meeting with the port on a weekly basis, and we're kind of in the middle of grant preparation season. So what we're doing is gathering information for what we expect to be the grants that'll open up starting late this month through sometime in June. If the grants are comparable to what was available last year, we'll have somewhere in the neighborhood of a $30 million potential grant application. We don't know exactly how much those grants are going to be for until the guidelines are published. And again, the publication of those guidelines is going to trickle out over the next couple of months. So for all the details, I'd like at this point to turn it over to Andrew Entrican, who is also with us virtually.
Good morning, commissioners. Chris, just to piggyback off of that, we've been undergoing an extensive GIS mapping exercise. To piggyback off of what Chris was saying, we've identified.
Andrew.
Oh, yep.
Andrew.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit more slowly and a little more loudly?
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
The volume is okay. Just speak slowly and clearly.
Okay, I will enunciate. So as Chris said, if we looked at the previous grant rounds, we think it could potentially be anywhere in the ballpark of $25 to $32 million for this coming round in the coming months. So what we've been doing is undergoing an extensive GIS mapping exercise to, one, identify all the areas in our community that are not receiving 100 down, 20 up speeds. And if we were to piggyback off of the port's currently funded projects, we've already identified nearly 4,000 address points that are currently today not receiving 100 down, 20 up speeds. And if we take the average of previous funds in terms of the cost to connect each premise, we're at anywhere between $6,000 and $10,000 per home pass. And as we move forward through this mapping exercise, we'll be able to drill down to just what we think a good calculated construction cost will be for these per home pass. And so just at 10,000, just going on the high end, for $10,000 per home pass, we're looking at definitely exceeding a $32 million ask already, and there's still more to go. So that's what I have to share. Other than that, we've been meeting with our partners weekly. As Chris mentioned, we've been meeting with the county. Things are really moving forward. So I'll leave it there. If I missed anything, Chris, I'll kick it back to you.
Looks like Commissioner
Thanks,
Deshmani
Andrew.
has a hand up. Thanks, Andrew. Commissioner Deshmani.
So both for repeating the point. Thank you, Andrew, for speaking slower. There's a little bit of garbling on the audio on the TV. So to just repeat the point, we are looking for individuals who are not receiving 100 megabits down, 20 megabits up for their connection speed. That is a new standard for what is considered acceptable service in the state of Washington. And we are allowed to apply for public funding for the purpose of serving those people. And that's what we're intending to do. The scope of that could be in excess of $30 million. So now I have a question about that. If we think about that, Chris, that's doubling our budget. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Tripling.
It depends on how you do the numbers, gross or, right, okay, thank you. So just something to think about. What happens to an organizational financial planning and an organization's budget planning? You know, that thing that all organizations want to achieve is that traceable, smooth organizational. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about much better than I do, but you know what I'm referring to. It's going to present some challenges for Annette, I assume. Or maybe not, maybe I misunderstand, but it's like a big increase in the way we do. And so things will seem wonky probably when we look at the budget as a result of that next year. Actuals versus, plan. So that's it's more of a comment, but I'd love an answer anyway.
So what we're actually applying for is capital construction grants that'll be done by a third party. So for us, it's, I guess the first thing is that currently the port's managing all $10 million of last year's grants. They may in fact manage all, if we get 31 million, which is what we think may be the maximum amount. But if we get all of that, chances are very good that the port may want to administer that themselves, and that our role will be helping them identify from a technical perspective where the grant applications should be made, and then helping them prepare the grant applications themselves.
Okay.
On the other hand, that may be more than the port can manage, in which case we have offered to step up. And then the question will be, is it beyond Andrew's bandwidth and we need additional help or not? And we're just not there yet. But at kind of the end of the day, it won't have any impact on our capital budget, because all of the funds that are going to be expended on that are going to be grant funded. So it should be nice and smooth when you look at our budgets, and fairly predictable.
One of the things I'd like to share is that, with COVID and our capital projects, there were things that when we reviewed the budget this year that took extra explanation and all that. And I'm not so much concerned about us understanding. I mean, you will spend as much time as you need to make sure that we understand what the budget says. I'm interested in things like creditability and things like that, and what kind of impact this kind of a shift in grant funding does to our organization.
I would have to defer to Annette on that.
Yeah, right.
but-
And I'm just asking that it's a thought that I like that.
Yeah, and I think if you get grant funding as an organization, I don't think it has any impact on your credit rating one way or the other. I think it's a credit neutral event, but I really would like to hear a CPA give an opinion on that,
Maybe
not an old engineer.
Maybe either through an email or through, I just want to know that it's something that you talked about internally and considered the point.
It is a good point, and we haven't talked about that internally. I honestly don't think it impacts credit rating,
Yeah,
but we'll find out.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have some questions, but Commissioner Murphy, I want to give you an opportunity to go before me if you have any questions.
Thanks, Christine, but I do not have any questions at this time.
Okay, great. So my question, Andrew, is so as Commissioner Deshmani brought up and you've brought up, the governor just signed the SB 5715, which changes my reading of it here is that it changes the definition of broadband or broadband service to minimum speeds of 120 megabits per second instead of 25.3 megabits per second. Again, though, I mean, I after reading that update that the governor signed the bill, I did a speed test here at my home in Bellingham, and I don't meet those speeds. So, how do can you walk us through a little bit more about what this means in terms of where we can apply in the context of the other restrictions that we have in terms of RDOF areas and places where private ISPs would challenge our grant applications, just so that I have a clearer sense of that and members of the public understand that too?
It's a great question. There's a methodology that we typically.
Hey, Andrew, maybe try to use the microphone that's built into your laptop rather than your ear pods. Whenever you speak, it creates a massive reverb.
We can't hear you now, though. Your computer might be muted.
You're unmuted. You might just need to switch computer settings to your built-in mic.
No, Commissioner
Can I-
Grant, let me
Can I
take
just
a
walk
high
down the
level
hall?
pass at that.
There you go. That sounded better.
Are we good?
Um,
I can walk down the hall and talk to you directly if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you come down in person, Andrew, and I'll take a quick pass at it and see if I can help here. So
Plus, I'd like to see Andrew. It's been
Yeah.
a long time.
So when you apply for grant funding, they look at different layers of proof, whether you're in an RDOF area or not, that's mapped. And then you look at what speeds the current incumbents say they provide. which may not be actual tested speed. And then you look at crowdsourced data and other sources of information. So, you know, if you're in Bellingham, you may be in an area where the incumbent claims that they have gig service. And so for us to propose grant funding there, we would have to refute that. So the first thing is you'd have to go through several layers of our stuff that says, in fact, you exceed the 100 down or 100 down and 20 up. And then we go to crowdsourced information after that. So there's kind of it's like peeling the onion when you figure out what area to target. So what we've targeted are those areas where everybody agrees that the service is either non-existent or very bad. And that's where we've targeted to begin with. I think that areas like yours, Commissioner Grant, there's going to be a time when you know, we can go back and just use crowdsourced speed testing and say, you know, propose grants for that area. Today, though, we've got low hanging fruit where people don't have service at all. And we're trying to hit that first.
Great, thanks. It's a question that, you know, I think is, we're going to hear from a lot of different people in the community now that definition has changed. So thanks. I don't know if Andrew's there and if he has anything else to add.
Yeah, Andrew, please come up to the microphone.
I don't know how much more there is to add. That was a great overview. Typically, to go through the methodology takes about 40 minutes to go through and walk through all the different layers, talking about peeling back the layers of the onion. But essentially, Chris is absolutely right. What we're doing is we've identified the areas where the providers, down to the census block level, where the providers are self-reporting the fact that they don't offer 100 down, 20 up. So we're not even scraping the areas where there's any, you know, well, we might or might not be. So we talked about roughly 4,000 address points. We haven't even begun to get into the areas that, Commissioner, you're talking about,
Right.
which we acknowledge exist. But to start, we stay out of the RDOF funded areas.
Right.
There's all these different layers that make up the methodology.
So just to summarize before, and then Commissioner Dashmani, so we're prioritizing areas where ISPs are self-reporting speeds that are under 120.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Dashmani.
Those are areas.
Yeah. Oh, Chris.
Did you say under? Because I thought I was hearing where there was little or no response in those areas of service.
Yeah, if the providers are reporting less than 120, then you know, that makes that a target area. And kind of the reason is, if somebody says, hey, you know, I'm not providing what's defined as broadband service, and then, you know, we ask for a grant to build some infrastructure in the area to hopefully increase the speed, they can't challenge it. So us going where they agree with makes it much more likely the grant will just sail through. That's really our target. Is we want to maximize what we get for the county and really roll it out. So we're looking for uncontested areas. I guess that's the cleanest way to put it. The area where Commissioner Grant was talking about would be contested. Comcast or somebody would come in and say, no, and they'd make us prove it. And we'd have to go through that challenge process inside the grant application. And then, you know, it's going to be easier for the state boards or the federal board to award uncontested grants than it'll be for them to award contested grants.
Thank you.
My question is about population. So if you were to guess, based on what you currently know, the number of people that will fall into this under 100 megabits down, 20 megabits up service, how many people do you think there are left that the ISPs are self-reporting to have less?
I haven't run that, but I can get back to you. And if we take an average to people per household, or 4, 3, whatever you want to use, I don't know what the typical, but if we know there's roughly 4,000, 8,000 people.
Well, since you're going to run the analysis, then I'd like to tell you what I'm trying to get at.
Sure.
what I'm trying to get at is the percentage of the population of Whatcom County that we're planning to, as based on our current assumptions, planning to serve with excellent service who have been essentially unserved. Because to be clear, I think that the individuals that the telecoms are reporting to be 100 megabits down, 20 megabits up are individuals that are probably largely unserved. I don't suspect they're incentivized to report somebody who's 87 megabits down, 12 megabits up in the category of below the thresholds. They're naturally incentivized to group all those people that even have reasonable service, like Commissioner Grant, like myself, into the basket of 120. They'll report that I'm getting 100, which I'm certainly not. So what I want to understand is what percentage of the population of Whatcom County we are intending to make an impact in this next round. That's an important thing for us to know and to report to the community. There's an implicit value judgment in the approach we're taking. That value judgment is that it's the public sector of which the PUD is part of. It's our responsibility to take a kind of a almost like a rural electrification philosophical approach, where we are trying to serve the people that have no electricity, for example. Where that's the value judgment that we're making to support those individuals with the belief that everybody should now have some kind of access. And there's value judgments that I don't disagree with, but I sometimes wonder if we think about serving the most people with public dollars, we might take a different approach. We might take a more combative approach. Is that wise? I'm not saying it's wise or unwise, but it's something to think about. And also to make clear to the public that the approach we're taking is based on an implicit value judgment. I think it's not just the value judgment behind this PUD, it's the PUD culture. That's what the PUDs are across the state have been about for a very long time. So I'm not saying we depart from that, but it's important that we be clear about that too.
So I think I understand. I'm going to go back to the data request now. So I'll ask Andrew to look into this, but what we probably want to do is look at the percentage of the population that we're going to attempt to serve with this program compared to the percent of the population that's subject to the program. For instance, the RDOF areas are out of bounds. So if we have, and I'm just picking a number out of the air, I have no idea. If we have 100,000 citizens in Whatcom County,
I think 225, is that right?
no, 100,000 that are unserved
Okay.
or underserved. If we have 100,000 of them, 50,000 of them are in the RDOF areas, and they're essentially off limits to begin with. Then we're looking at serving 4,000 passes of a smaller number. So I would number one urge you to think about that. The other thing is we're not making any value judgments here other than we're trying to figure out which grants are most likely to be funded. And the value judgment is implied at the level of the people who are administering the grants themselves and they're writing that program. We're just trying to maximize what we get for the folks of Whatcom County.
And so you're making a really good point. The values might be more embedded in the granting agencies.
Yes.
And in our choice.
Yeah, and we're just trying to maximize what we get for the folks of Whatcom County. The other thing I do want to point out is that if you're in an area where, we put in some fiber backbone and ultimately you get fiber to the home, upstream from that fiber, you could have slower service at the source. So you may not get, gig speed or even 100 down, 20 up, just because you've got fiber that's been put in here. There may need to be work done upstream of where that project is to increase the speed of the entire network. And we're not addressing that. It's a flaw in the whole approach. And I think philosophically, the idea is if we get more fiber out there, eventually all this gets pieced together and the speeds go up for everybody. And we're making it a lot easier for the ISPs and the telecoms to finish those little connections that really increase the speed. Commissioner?
Going off of what O'Toole said, then all the work that Andrew has done, laying out a plan for us. I saw the mapping already. You're not saying you're gonna change all that, are you? Or are you gonna stick with that plan that you have already set up as the areas that we feel we can give the best service?
Are you talking about the four?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's last year's grants. So what we're talking about now is in addition to that, and we're trying to connect up those areas to the extent possible.
I guess I could have another meeting with you, Andrew, to catch me up on that.
Always here to help. Yep.
I want to be in that meeting too.
Okay.
We got to be careful not to
I'm
establish a
teasing.
quorum.
I'm just teasing.
Well, we're happy to have two separate meetings. We just don't want to establish a quorum without public notice.
All right.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Anything else, Chris?
Commissioners?
I have one more question for you, Andrew, before we let you off the hot seat here. I was hoping to
Okay.
get an update on the work that NOAANet is doing for us.
The work that NOAANet is doing for us, both NOAANet and the Petrichor agreements are being routed to get executed, and we'll have a preliminary meeting to get things kicked off. And what NOAANet will be looking for, they'll be taking our mapping that we do and applying the analysis over on top of that. So they're waiting for us to really get going.
And so when do we expect that work to be done? In our late February meeting, we talked about maybe a May timeline for NOAANet to provide a report to us. Is that still on track?
That May timeline is most likely and will be pushed out to end of May probably to get that going, because they need about 3 to 4 weeks to apply their analysis over our networking preliminary network design. And same thing with the Petrichor agreement.
Okay. And just for those of the public, that can you just very quickly summarize what NOAANet will be doing for us?
Yes, NOAANet will be looking at our preliminary route maps, and they'll be applying a financial analysis on top of that for the needed equipment and necessary ISP components to deliver services to the end user. Whereas what we've been talking about to date has been infrastructure-based, getting a piece of fiber to every home and business in these unserved and underserved areas. Whereas the NOAANet portion of what we're working on is what it takes to actually deliver services to the end user, which is something our organization hasn't dived into historically or looked at historically.
Okay. Commissioner Deshmani.
So- Yeah, so the NOAANet study is going to still evaluate the potential of the PUD becoming an ISP.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're looking at probably more like a June timeframe then for that? Or what date?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, the rules, when the rules come out for these federal dollars, which we aren't privy to until the NOFA comes out, the notice of funding opportunity, it could have different rules in there, and we might need to make some adjustments to where our preliminary route maps are. So there could be some finessing and changes until we have a very solid final plan that says this is the number or something like that. So it'll be a moving target as these funding opportunities are announced, and we can unpack the layers of the onion that will make our grants successful. And it could change. We're just working off historically what has been presented in previous rounds and previous NOFOs.
Great.
The short answer is yes.
Well, thank you for that update, Andrew. I have one more broadband related update based on my role on the telecom committee for the Washington State PUD Association that I wanted to just share. And that is that the Washington State Broadband Office finally hired a new director after, I think it was over 6 months. So his name is Mark Visconi, I believe. I don't have the the announcement right in front of me, but he started April 1st. And he has a background in working with rural communities in Alaska, and then was with the Utilities and Transportation Commission for Washington State most recently. And I reached out to George Kahn, the executive director of WPUDA, and Angela Bennick, who is the chair for the telecom committee for WPUDA, and just said that I really hope we can have Mark to one of our telecom meetings soon so that the PUDs can get to know him and ask questions. And George said they're already working on it. And I did also mention to WPUDA also that I was hoping to talk to Mark and to have more engagement with WPUDA on the challenges that we're facing with RDOF areas, in particular the provision in RDOF that says that 40% of the auctioned area should be constructed by the end of year 3. I wanted to understand more about how that's going to be enforced and measured. And George said that the PUD Association has been in touch with Maria Cantwell's office about this because she is involved with the FCC through one of her committees. So, you know, no clear answers yet, but I wanted to share that I'm trying to push on those two fronts so that we develop a strong relationship with the new director of the state broadband office, and that we continue understanding how we might support individuals in RDOF areas, if at all, if nothing else, just to let them know more about the rules and how they're enforced. So just wanted to share that update as part of the broadband update, since I'm the committee chair for the telecom committee. So that's it for me. Commissioner,
Okay, thank you.
do either of you have any other questions or comments on broadband, or can we move on to our next agenda item? Thumbs up?
I'm good to move on.
Okay, great. Well, we have a, and thank you, Andrew and Chris, as always, for leading us in our broadband program update and the great work. We have our next item under old business is strategic planning. And we have 90 minutes scheduled for this. And so Jim, are you there? If you are, yeah, there you go. So Jim Darling is with Leeward Strategies, and he is supporting the PUD in updating our strategic plan, and has helped us in the past on several of these updates. So we are happy to have you here, Jim. I know you've been doing a lot of work, and the staff has been doing a lot of work since our last commission discussion about strategic planning. So I will pass it over to you.
Okay, and can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Can everyone in the room hear you okay? Thumbs up? Yeah, okay, great.
Okay, well, let me give me the signal if it changes. So thank you, Commissioner Grant. Today we have as we have a PowerPoint just to guide our discussion, and that's going to include some comments by the staff as they begin to work on some of these issues. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
So Jim, can I hop in just for a second?
Sure.
Just to remind everybody, we've got two parallel processes going on here. And the first is we have a number of initiatives that came out of our old, I don't mean old like obsolete, but our former strategic plan. So those initiatives are flowing through this year. One of those initiatives is to update or create a new strategic plan, however that works out. And that's the first initiative. So what we're going to see today is really an overview of that entire process, which is executing on the initiatives that flow out of our current strategic plan and updating of the new strategic plan. So that'll be what Jim's going to cover for us. So Jim, sorry to jump in like that, but take it
Okay, no
away.
problem. Okay, so let me, can you see the screen?
Yep.
Yeah, we've got it.
Got it? Okay. Let me. So, yeah, as Chris said, we've been having discussions. We had discussions last year when the commission set their priorities going forward. And we're really in a period of refinement as we move forward. And we're starting to pivot a little bit from those, as Chris said, to the strategic plan, which you'll see in a minute on the schedule. We plan on having the commission consider and adopt in July. And that will be applicable for the next several years, and also be very informative on the budget. So, we're really kind of at a critical time. Today, we wanted to, and some of the stuff we'll move through very briefly, but review our preliminary goals, goal areas, and some of those are external and internal. We will have some discussion with the staff as we go through. I think we'll be fairly informal about capacity reports to undertake those, and kind of a little bit more refinement on their ideas of how we move forward on those individual topics. Then we wanted to have a very preliminary discussion about mission, vision, and values. And then finally, before we sign off, we'll discuss a community engagement plan and have some ideas that we've worked on for how that might work going forward. So just to remind everybody, we met on March the 22nd. We are meeting here today on April the 12th. Between March 22nd and today, we forwarded to the commission and staff some preliminary ideas, most of which you've seen before and you saw on the 12th, excuse me, on March 22nd. But really with a focus on staff being able to make comments on them and start to allocate resources, either in-house resources or financial resources towards them. And then today, as I said, today we'll be discussing those, taking a look at the mission, values, vision, and then community engagement plan. And when we get done today, before we leave, we will talk about, okay, so what's next coming up in June 14th, which will be the next time that we'll get together. So not to belabor this, but just to remind everybody that this is the kind of classic strategic plan architecture. And what we're talking about now are preliminary vision, mission, values, goals, and strategies. Tactics, the raw detail comes later, and that's typically more of a staff-driven process. But what we're trying to do in the next couple meetings is get more refinement, as I said, on these building blocks of the strategic plan. And if you'll recall, we discussed before what the different building blocks mean. The preliminary vision is about describing a future when the PUD is successful. The mission is why you exist and your role in the community. The values are how you will undertake your work. We'll discuss those in a little bit. The goals are what you're going to accomplish. Strategies are typically the route you're going to get to the goal, and tactics are the details to support and essentially energize the strategy. So just a little bit of a reminder as we go through here what these various things mean and why they're relevant to the process. I do want to tell you, though, that there's no book on this. There's no rules about it. A lot of organization calls goals, objectives, or priorities. We have been using these terms, and we can always change them, but each of these building blocks in this pyramid of strategic planning need to be addressed. So let's walk through the and we reviewed these at the last meeting. I'm going to ask the commission to not get too preoccupied with text at this point, unless it has an enormous impact on on these goal areas or goals. We have plenty of time to wordsmith this in the future. But these are the ones we reviewed last time.
Jim, it's a little bit hard to read the writing on the screen.
Excuse me?
On this slide.
Can what?
You have to move the microphone forward.
It's a little bit hard to read the writing on that screen.
Oh, well, let me walk through them.
It's fine for us online.
Yeah. We may have that issue going forward because
Thanks, Mike.
great for me too. But let me, if Commissioner, if it was okay, let me just recap them briefly. So the first one, and these are not were not originally in any particular order, but you'll recall at the last meeting we rearranged them in the order that we thought was more appropriate. But between 3 and 4, between 4 and 6, the priority differential is pretty close. So I'd keep that in mind. So 1 was the strategic plan update that we're doing right now. 2 was the broadband strategy, advancing the community-wide strategy and making broadband available to underserved areas of Whatcom County. 3rd was customer service, maintaining the high degree of customer service you have to your local industries that rely on your power and water. Number 4, continue to support water associations with technical support. Number 5 is to continue the PUD's involvement and assistance and support in regional efforts to address water rights issues and the water resources throughout the county. Number 5 is clean and renewable energy, and defining your role in advancing clean and renewable energy locally. Number 7 was to refresh your out-facing and internal-facing identity with the community, government, and industry. Number 8 was advancing clean industry in Whatcom County from an economic development perspective of attracting clean industry and growing clean industry. Number 9 was pretty specific about a pilot program to demonstrate the feasibility of providing water to those that need it. Number 10 is from our last meeting, it's in red here, is one we discussed about the PUD as a resource. And that was providing education and understanding utility issues. We talked about that a bit in the last several weeks, and that more appears to be a day-to-day business that you do, and you don't necessarily need to have a strategic goal about it because it's already baked into what the PUD does. So that one the proposal is for that one to come out of the strategic plan. Number 10 was community impact analysis to determine the economic impact of the PUD on the Whatcom economy. As we've talked, those are typically these in-plan models, and they're fairly affordable and fairly straightforward. And then a new one, as we've discussed, is an asset management plan for both the physical assets of the PUD as well as the very important personnel assets of the PUD. And most important in that is having a good solid succession plan, because you have some very talented people. So that was a new one that came in the last couple of weeks. So with that, we wanted just to walk through each of these and give the commission some more detail. And hopefully, is that one any better in terms of your ability to read it?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Might change the lighting in the room, and that helped a lot.
Oh, okay. All right. So Chris, I think we wanted to, maybe I'd make a comment, and I think you and primarily Steve Jilk might comment on these. The first one was about updating the strategic plan and pursue the plan in the second quarter of the year, which we're currently doing, and wrap it up in July, by the end of July, in time to inform the budget. Chris and I have been working on scope, and it feels like between a $20,000 and $25,000 effort to do that. These processes, as my experience has been, is they're always difficult to predict. because we don't know where we're going sometimes in the amount of discussion it will take to get resolution on issues, and how much time is considered. But this is more or less what the cost would be to complete it. Chris and I have talked about, I've had a contract up until today, and that I think we're maybe 50% the way through that. And we would use those remaining resources, which would be part of this number here, and then start to pivot after today over to the strategic planning effort going forward. So any comments, Chris, on that?
No, as Jim said, we've talked about this a number of times. I've got the scope of work. It's very reasonable, and I have a very, very high degree of confidence in Jim being able to help us get this forward on time.
This is Steve. I just would comment that there are sufficient funds in the 2022 budget to cover this along with the work that Jim has already been doing. So.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And so when on this one, when at the end of today's presentation, before we leave, we'll go back over the schedule so we know what's coming up next and what the big picture looks like. So goal number 2 is was surrounding broadband. And there were 2 strategies here about developing a work plan for the underserved areas of the county. You just were talking about that. And second strategy was develop a plan of finance for the PUD's responsibility in expanding fiber. And you can see there what success looks like. And Chris, can I defer to you on this one, or I can make comments, or would you like to take the lead?
Let me just go ahead and talk about it a little bit.
Sure.
So this gets right back to what we were talking about in the broadband update. We're going to be working with the port to scope out what we're going to be able to get through grant funding. We're going to work with NOAANET to find out if there's anything additional to that we would want to do. And that's going to really tell us what the overall strategy that we'll recommend to the commission is. I think it's going to be fundamentally focused on getting fiber assets deployed throughout Whatcom County through grant applications. You guys are not going to be surprised that that's our strategy. And there may be something in addition to that. The second part of it is, as we see how that plays out, we'll know if it has any impact beyond what's in our current budget or not. And that'll inform M22, which is the second measure. So I'd like to throw that open for questions. I see Commissioner Dashmani has a question.
So the 2.2 doesn't say a lot from my perspective. Expanding fiber infrastructure, I can't put my finger on what that means. So perhaps something like in serving poorly served rather than the underserved, or some other statement about what the sub goal essentially is. Because for me, expanding just for the sake of expanding is less clear than who are we expanding it for.
Okay.
And Chris, I'm making notes to capture these, so.
Yeah, wasn't a big part of 2.2 related to exploring the local utility district model that Kitsap is using, and I think Mason PUD as well?
And that's what we expect to come out of the NOAANET studies, is some guidance on that.
On LUDs?
Well, for instance, if I'll throw out a number. I have no idea what it is, but let's say it's $15 million to do the cabinets and the routers and everything on premise, and that's what it would take to set up an ISP. then we'd have to have, that as part of our goal, and then we'd have to have a financial plan backing it up. How you finance that can be through an LUD, it can be through bonds. There's a bunch of different approaches. But first you've got to decide if that's what you want to do. And if it is what you want to do, then you got to figure out how to pay for it.
So from my perspective, the idea of doing something to serve the poorly served includes potentially, if it makes sense, from United Speak, it means potentially exploring things like LUDs, and it means potentially other tactics, methods to serve the people that are not just strictly unserved or underserved.
Well, just remember, this is in two pieces. One is deciding what you want to do, and the second is how to pay for it. And if you don't know what you want to do, it's rather difficult to put together a financing plan.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing we have to get through is what is it we want to be,
Sure.
and then how do you pay for it? There's a million different ways to pay for it. If, for instance, what we want to do is be the organization that helps get Capitol Fiber in the air, there may not be any long-term impact, and therefore no need to finance. So, we have to figure out what it is we want to do before we figure out how to pay for it.
So your point is that the phrase expanding fiber infrastructure is general and enough that it leaves room for us to still figure out a lot that we haven't figured out correctly.
That's correct. I mean, I have a point of view on this, there's no doubt about it. But the other thing is that I can be wrong. And, that's why we want to do the studies and look at all this and have a thorough discussion.
I think one of the significant things here is the timing it's pretty ambitious, but to complete it by the end of the year, by 2022. So something to keep in mind. Let's move on to strategic goal number 3 on customer service. This is really something that Chris is going to pursue and use Ann's experience in this to do a biannual survey, starting for one this year by the end of the year, first of all, and that's the first strategy. And then the second piece of that is obviously implementing what other adjustments need to be made in the customer service based on the findings. The thought was that it would involve staff time, and there'd be some minor contract support possibly in the design of the survey instrument. So Chris, anything additional?
Well, I'd like to call on Ann and see if she has some comments for us. Ann?
Good morning, everyone. On the customer service survey, I've gotten a hold of WAPUDA. They've done several surveys with other local PUDs. I'll be getting questions off those surveys and also checking with the commissioners to see if there's any other things they want to add to it. We have less than 50 customers. I think probably the best way to do it would be reach them by mail and then follow up with a phone call for the first survey. So I'm working on getting the questions together, and then we'll have a memo out to the commission with suggestions.
And so just a reminder, the way these things work, you get let's assume for a moment that we get a very high return, like more than 50%. Typically you get between 20 and 25% returns on customer satisfaction surveys. So on each question, you'll have a distribution of answers. And so you look at that distribution, and then you look at the central point or the centroid of the distribution, and does it tell you something that where you'd want to address it? And then so you identify those actions that you want to take that would improve a particular measure. You do that, and then you turn around and survey again. So the first survey serves two functions: to get a distribution around the questions, and also to establish a baseline that you're working against. So this is something that, you can't do it once, you have to do it over and over and over. And, that's our commitment, is to set this up so that we have a rigorous way of getting input back from our customers on how we're doing.
Okay,
How, do we have in our strategic plan a place where we're capturing the wants and needs of the public beyond customers? In this, under this task of under the strategic planning surveying?
This is how we measure the customers who are getting our current services. That's the intent of this initiative. So it's literally customer service, not community service.
Is there a goal under the strategic plan where we have a goal that addresses our social media approach and how we communicate and see more general input from the community?
I think that's actually the next initiative that we're going to be talking about, or the one after. I forget the order they're in exactly, but
it's coming up.
yes.
Hey, Commissioner Deshmani, we got a chat that you're a little bit hard to hear, so maybe just move the microphone a little closer when you're speaking.
Also, make sure the bright LED light is turned on, because if it's off, then your microphone is not turned on.
Yeah, and that notion on social media comes up here in another, I think you're right, Chris, maybe another 2 goals comes up. So if you want to move on to goal number 4 about water associations, and Steve, Jill provided a lot of information on this. There were 3 strategies about responding when needed by the water association to assist them on policy and technical issues. Number 2 is somewhat of some social media, but a communication strategy to improve access portals for the water associations to reach out to the PUD. And 3rd was explore emergency water offering to water associations if they're faced with a shortfall. And I think, Steve, were you going to comment on this one?
I'll make a few comments. Just that I think the second one, 4.2, improve access portals, that's pretty straightforward. And I think it's just a matter of working with Ann and also with Rebecca and Dave Olson to make sure that our website has enough information that people seeking contact can use that access point. Also, though, on 4.2, we may use our website to give brief updates in terms of access from the public or from water associations to what we actually can provide in terms of support. The first one, respond when needed and called on water association to assist them on policy and technical issues. That's just basically ongoing as long as Dave is willing to stick with us, utilizing Dave. He's built quite a network out there, access, contacts, providing services, and making sure that we take advantage of grants and so forth. 4.3, that one, I think the October date is reasonable, but I think that it all depends upon what we really mean by water shortfall policy. And I think we may talk a little bit more about it in another goal, but it's really determining. I know we cited the Skagit model. Skagit model it's really not a model that you can duplicate or replicate and utilize here because of so many other opportunities in Whatcom County and the Nooksack Basin that we're dealing with the potential for shortfall as it relates to water rights, actual water availability, where and so forth. But I think October deadline is reasonable considering so many other things going on in the county. So.
Okay, anything else?
And Dave Olson put in the chat, there are other efforts in Whatcom County underway that we can partner with for 4.2 and 4.3.
Yep, good. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, moving on to number 5. This was on the issue of protecting and managing the local water resources, and with a specific target on water rights. And there were 3 strategies. First one was developing a firm PUD position regarding the resolution of water rights. Had a more of an immediate sense to it. Participating in the county-wide adjudication process that's underway. And third was support the county executive water rights settlement effort to the extent that it made sense to the PUD. And once again, Steve, can we call upon you to make a few comments on this one?
Sure. This one is probably the hardest of all the water issues that we've got highlighted in terms of the goals, because of so many other programs that are ongoing. And I know we've identified the county executives water rights settlement. We just received yesterday a draft of the solutions table. That's what the county executive is using as a term for his efforts to start negotiations on water rights in the basin. We've also got, the water supply plan going on that Rebecca is managing. The county is doing a drainage-based management program. We've got the salmon recovery plan. So many other projects and programs that are ongoing under the Watershed Management Board that these 3, 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 can possibly be impacted by and impact. I'll just very quickly, the PUD statement regarding the resolution of water rights. I know we're going to have an executive session this morning to discuss a position on that. The $300,000 that is budgeted, that is in 2022 for work on the adjudication. And I think we'll have some discussion as to what that number looks like in 2023 and beyond. The participate in countywide adjudication process and establish PUD water rights. I think that if we look at 5.1 and 5.2, they're really 2 separate processes, but they are going to be ongoing at the same time, and we have to manage that. So all 3, I know we've got, myself as with assistance from PUD legal counsel. That's a number of legal counsels. We've got John Sitkin, as well as Matt Wells and Sarah Mack, and now we've hired Holland and Hart, another legal counsel. So this will be critical in terms of combining and working 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 together, along with so many other things that we're doing in the basin in terms of the Watershed Management Board, and making sure that we identify where the PUD fits in terms of protecting its water rights, but also working with other agencies. The June 14th on 5.1, I'm not so sure. I'm sorry, 5.2. I'm not so sure that, we should be able to identify path forward on 5.2 by June 14th. But keep in mind that that's probably a minimum of a 10-year process, so.
Yeah, Steve, I was going to say the Department of Ecology, when they briefed the legislature, said that the adjudication could last 18 years before they get to any kind of settlement discussion. So, really, that's what they're advising in the Yakima Basin. I think you shared with me is 46 years and counting. So, I think it'd be fair to say that in one form or another, this particular item has got to be part of our strategic plan, because it's going to be central to what we do for the next 15 to 20 years.
I would agree.
Luckily, things are less pages today than they were in the old days.
Yeah, I'm not saying that this is super adversarial, and it so far it's not. It's more cooperative than adversarial. But not to say it won't get adversarial at some point, but yeah, this is where everybody's kind of requested help in getting a settlement, and help may look like a judge.
The challenge is going to be how we manage our protection of our water rights through the adjudication process. And if we continue to participate in all these other water-related management projects that are going on, programs in the county, and identify how we do both at the same time. And I don't disagree. I think that the 10 years is ridiculously short. But in the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done to do both, prepare ourselves for the filing of the adjudication in 2023, as well as participate in the other projects in the basin.
And as Steve could share with us in real detail, the adjudication just sets up our water rights. It doesn't really talk about what to do to improve water quality, water quantity, conservation, all that kind of stuff. Those are the ongoing efforts, and they will be informed and probably changed by the outcome of the adjudication. So it's a heavily intertied mass of efforts that we've got going here.
Commissioner Deshmani, you had your hand up.
I think Commissioner Murphy just put his
Sorry.
hand up, and I've spoken more, so.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Murphy.
Chris and Steve, a lot of talk is being said about the PUD water rights, but really isn't this a Whatcom County water right issue?
Let me give a shot at that. So inside the Nooksack Basin, there are people who have claims to the water, and some of those claims are senior, some of them are junior, and that means senior claims came earlier in time. Junior claims came later in time. So, everybody who has a claim has to have that submitted. Now, there's a lot of people out there who use water who may not have claims. There are claims that may not be perfected from a legal perspective. And what the adjudication does is it sorts out all of those claims, senior to junior, figures out which ones are in fact legal, and then at some point compares that to flow data in the Nooksack Basin. Now, the adjudication also covers groundwater, and groundwater and surface water are heavily interrelated. And so when you start looking at all the different claims that are out there, for instance, we've got claims to the Nooksack surface water, but I believe, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, we also have groundwater claims out in the Grandview area.
Yes.
So, there's lots of different claims that people have. So this process is to go through thousands or perhaps tens of thousands of claims and sort them out, senior to junior, valid to invalid, perfected to not perfected, and then say, okay, here's what all that looks like compared to the flows and what we can expect in the river. And that's really what adjudication is all about. It doesn't even say what to do about water quality or conservation or anything.
No, but we are not the only big have water rights. I mean, I think Bellingham has more water rights than we do. And I never hear them talked about, or I don't see them at any table of discussions. As well as when you have all the water associations, not all of them have all the water rights they need. In fact, they're using more than what, and then it gets down to the private wells like myself. I don't have a water right, but I'm granted so much water to use by the state at this time. I think that's going to be all questioned and in jeopardy in the future. Is that true?
My understanding is that if you're drawing water from the ground in Whatcom County, the adjudication will at some point ask you to file a claim, and then there'll be a ruling on that claim and whether or not you've perfected it. So I think that the short answer to your question is yes, that's all in play. Another thing is that the city of Bellingham does participate in the WIRA 1 discussions, and they're in a lot of these other forums. They're going to have to submit their claim in adjudication, just like us, just like the Nooksack, just like the Lummi, just like the city of Linden, Blaine, Ferndale. You know, all these people have water rights claims. You know, are they using more than their claim? Are they using less? Have they used it for a long time? When was it formally established? All that's got to get sorted out. This is a big deal. And our attorney is leaning forward, so I'm going to defer. to
I'm
him.
just gonna, Mike, just the commissioner, the exemption for the exempt well is just the exemption from having to obtain a paper certificate. It doesn't exempt you from the water code and all the requirements. So everyone on an quote unquote exempt well, they're just exempt from having the paper certificate. They will be part of the adjudication process and have to show the validity of their assertion of a water right, even without a paper certificate.
And my last question is I don't think the public really knows this is going on and how it can possibly affect them. And, you know, we're knee deep in this already, if not more. But yet I would imagine there's people out there that don't have a clue this is going on.
Or they don't understand the order of magnitude or their effect or what's going to happen. I would say, you know, ecology presumably will engage in some extensive community outreach, but at some point, if authorized after the next legislative session and funded, the Department of Ecology will file a petition, a lawsuit, and serve every party who has a potential claim to a water right, be it a water right claim, being a water right permit, being an exempt well based upon the well start cards, based upon a ground or surface water certificate or permit to withdraw. So there will be tens of thousands of people served with a lawsuit. If what we expect sometime in the summer or fall of 2023. And that lawsuit will be the adjudication in Whatcom County Superior Court.
I think also that I agree with what John just said, and that, but the Department of Ecology, with their public face on this process, seems to be indicating it's just a very simple process, maybe lengthy, maybe costly, but it's really just a simple thing about, okay, now we're going to file the adjudication with the state. We're going to now request claims from all parties in Whatcom County in the Nooksack Basin. I don't think that, based upon my limited observations with how ecology is approaching this, I don't think they have a clue as to how this is going to work. They may have a book that they can pull out from somebody's desk to say, this is how we're going to attack this. I don't think they have a clue as to how complicated and how very ambiguous this is going to be. They've had one presentation, a public presentation on how they're going to approach this. I mean, I don't think that they have a clear understanding of how this is going to work. And I think it's going to be a very, very difficult time for the first couple of years after they file the process, the adjudication with the state and the Superior Court to get this managed. I think that the key thing for us is to do both what we're saying in 5.0 here, and that is continue to work with our legal counsel, with our fisheries folks that we've hired, and manage as best we can the process moving forward on protecting our rights, but at the same time stay engaged in other opportunities in the basin for settlement, because it's going to be critical that we do that. So
I agree with you, Steve, but I think we represent all of Whatcom County, and I don't want to just put our rights up there first. So,
well, but we can't, we don't have the authority to quote represent anybody other than the PUD in the adjudication process. Now, if we want to talk about supporting the executive's water rights settlement effort, there may be opportunities as we move forward to engage with others in the basin to discuss settlement. We are managing a couple of large grants right now. We're engaged heavily with other projects on the Watershed Management Board where we can assist others, but we don't have the legal authority. And we certainly don't, I would hear from John Sitkin, but we don't want to take on in any way the legal representation of anybody else in the basin in terms of the actual adjudication process.
When you say what you say, basically on our water rights, we are out there speaking on behalf of our customers, protecting them.
We are there to speak on behalf of the PUD to protect its water rights that we utilize to serve our customers, as well as, and I've said this for years, to make sure that we retain as much of our paper water rights as we can to help others in the basin as these settlement discussions continue on and as we move through the adjudication so that we can make water available if it's needed and how we can make it available to other people in the county.
Commissioner Murphy. I want to answer the question a little differently. You bring up a really good point. I think you're exactly right. I think the majority of people who are ultimately going to be involved in this have no clue it's coming. They're just none whatsoever. And we're going to have to look for opportunities.
Second, we just lost.
Oh, there we go. We're back. We're back. We're going to have to look for opportunities to work with everybody on, publication, education, awareness of the issue. I totally agree with that. I don't know what that's going to look like, but we've got to keep our eyes open and help do that.
So I'm going to make this my final question so Jim can get back on to it. But I don't see that.
I'm coming after you.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't see that being said under 5, what we just discussed. So, yeah, but
5.3.
You don't agree?
At 5.3, support county executive settlement efforts.
I read that to say something different than our community.
I think it's a large enough bucket is my thought.
So I'd like to pile on to Commissioner Murphy, and then I have 2 other items. On this, perhaps having some, maybe it's even a little bit premature, Commissioner Murphy, but at some point, we're going to need to have community outreach. Because the Ag Water Board and the watershed improvement districts are doing, in my opinion, an excellent job of reaching out to the farmers that are connected to the watershed improvement districts. There are probably lots of farmers who are not connected or regularly participating in their WIDs. But that is the exception rather than the rule as far as the county's education and awareness around adjudication. There's lots of small water associations. There are people in the ag world who are outside of a particular WID. So there is definitely going to be people who will tend to have fallen through the cracks and will be surprised and maybe adversely impacted just from a lack of exposure and information on this issue. And at some point, I think we should try, perhaps through the work that Rebecca does, on the education front on water or through water week type in efforts to create greater awareness on what's happening with the adjudication. It is a little bit preliminary, perhaps one could argue, because as Steve pointed out, ecology themselves don't know how they're going to communicate. So it may be a little bit premature, but it's certainly going to need to be part of something that I'd like to see us being available as a resource to answer questions about what does adjudication mean for you kind of communication. Let's just say the county says, oh, we don't want to do that. And the county executive says, not that I don't think that's what the county executive county will say, but even if they say that, I still want the PUD to provide that resource because somebody should be providing as a local government a countywide resource. And it's not that much work. But at least letting people know that they're, what's coming down.
Before the next points, on this point, I think certainly the PUD can educate and be in the community outreach
Mhm.
and recommend,
That's what I mean.
what people might be looking at, gathering their
Do
historical
educational
data.
sessions.
Yeah,
okay,
what you could do to prepare for an adjudication, but to Steve's early point, the PUD cannot appear and represent in an adjudication private well owner or private farmer.
No,
Because
nor
we
do we
have,
want to.
nor would you want to,
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons, but the preliminary, this is coming, this is what you should do to prepare yourself, this is what kind of information you want to seek, talk to your neighbors, talk to your family, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so I agree with Commissioner Murphy that somehow or another not currently captured under strategic goal number 5, and somehow it should be captured. The second thing is I don't see a reference to state and federal policy. But ultimately what adjudication is the state undertaking their responsibility under, from my perspective, because they are the senior water right holder of the tribes, is basically largely about the state undertaking the protection of the tribe's senior water rights and treaty rights. So this task, this goal, somewhere or another should involve the PUD's participation in discovering what the state's policy and the federal government's policy goals are for the Waira 1 basin. We are being asked to become educated about this subject by the tribes. And so I think we somehow or another having some role that the PUD has is meeting with and or developing, getting the support of the federal government. For example, some of the things that come out of this, our water supply solutions could be quite expensive. For example, piping water from the main stem to substitute consumption of water from the tributaries in low flow times of the year, or pipelines that carry deep wells, water from deep aquifers to, again, provide water to end users of water where they have been previously using tributaries or wells that are directly hydrologically connected to tributaries. These are things that are very possible to do, but they're not cheap. And we're going to need federal money and state money. And I don't have any hesitance in asking for, or I would say demanding that kind of money, because ultimately this is about for the federal government's obligation to protect the usual and accustomed rights associated with water. So that's not on this chart. The relationship with the state and federal government is not explicitly on this chart, and I think that could be somehow captured. I'm not sure how.
Yeah, I'm kind of struggling with how to do that. I mean, we will comply with court orders, with the laws of the state and the laws of the nation. I'm not sure we need to put that in a strategic plan. It's just, we believe in the rule of law. The state, is my understanding, and this is where I'll have to defer to council, but the state owns the water. And this whole process was requested, it was started by the tribes making a request for the state to sort out of the water that the state owns, which is all of it, who gets what share of it. And that's what adjudication is. There's a recognition that the tribes have a claim that predates any settlement. And that's kind of a, so their rights may be most senior, but they're not quantified anywhere. So that's really the purpose behind all of this, is to quantify those rights and then figure out seniority and allocation. The things that you're talking about are what you do after all that's been done. How do you fix the problems that exposes? And there may or may not be federal help or state help. I think there probably will be, but I don't know that. But we got to get through the adjudication before we get to the fix.
I would argue that what makes it possible for the process to go more smoothly is a proactive approach. It's not hard to know for well-informed people in a sub-basin to know where the problems are, where the problems lie. And it's possible that, and I would argue as a commissioner, that I would like us to be as proactive as humanly possible in identifying solutions, not years after the dust is settled, but solutions concurrent with the foreseeable conclusions of where someone's water rights are going to be explicitly revoked.
So Commissioner, I completely agree with you. And our letter back to the federal government, I think it was last week.
Well, we haven't done it, it's on executive session.
I'm not going to talk about that. Let's just say that I completely agree with you. There's, and I think we've made offers to enter into settlement discussions many times before today. And I think that no matter where you are in any litigation, the parties can settle at any time and end the litigation. That's difficult to do when you've got tens of thousands of parties and competing interests, which we very well may have in this issue. But to your point, I think you're right. We should all be open to settlement throughout this entire process and actively seeking it.
I would just offer, I think a lot of your points are micro elements related to 5.0123.
Perhaps, yeah.
And I've just, not to dissuade the conversation, but I think Jim's been taking notes, and I wonder if, and Commissioner Grant may want to comment, but Jim, are you getting a flavor of this, to how to evolve or nuance and expand or evolve the strategies
You
here?
can help Jim too.
Yeah, Jim and I can sit down and talk.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, totally, John. And I have notes on issues that we need yet further resolution on. And also I'm making notes on what the practical implications of those are in terms of budget, staffing, and that type of thing.
And we do need to keep moving just to stay
I'm
on
not quite
track.
done.
Oh, okay. I have one comment, but go ahead, Commissioner Deshmani, before we move on.
So sorry, but I just wanted to quickly mention that at the couple of our quarterly water committee meeting for Whatcom, and Steve and I have both talked in the past months and months ago about the Department of Ecology continuing to insist that they are very much wanting to uphold the municipal water law. That was certainly the tone once again at the last water committee meeting from the Department of Ecology. And for the purposes of clarity, without getting into details, because we will have plenty of option to get into details again on the municipal water law, that's in our interest. The protection of the municipal water law and is very much in the PUD's interest. And so I just wanted to repeat that point, because we're hearing once again from ecology a desire to uphold and protect the implications of the municipal water law. Steve, would you clarify that if needed?
I just really quickly, I think what you're really speaking to is whether or not Department of Ecology is willing to really open up serious discussion about policy 2030. That's the policy that the Department of Ecology has adopted as their way to interpret the decisions, court's decisions on the municipal water law. I attended 2 meetings in the last week with the Washington Water Utility Council, as well as yesterday, the Washington Resource Advisory Committee. And ecology is starting to open up discussion on where they should go with policy 2030. The problem is 2030 is a policy. It's their way to interpret the municipal water law. It's not a rule. There's questions whether or not they should establish it as a rule or not, how that could impact PUDs and others. So I totally agree with you, Commissioner. We should find ways to make sure that ecology continues to support the municipal water law. The question right now is 2030 the way to do that? So
I have a real quick comment before we move on, and well, it's a question, and that is, this is a big ticket item when you look at the budget column here, and I think that this might be a difficult request, but I'm interested in understanding how this compares with the amount of money that other large water rights holders are spending to prepare for adjudication. And we might only be able to get that information from people like the city of Bellingham, but I think that it would be nice to have that information for our customers so that they understand, what's normal in terms of preparing for this kind of legal process. Because it is quite a large number. So I don't know if that's something you could look into or provide some just context around. And we don't necessarily need to do it now, but if there's a quick answer, feel free to jump in.
I would, there is no normal. Is my first quick answer. And Bellingham might be the only comparable. And it's so involved with legal strategy that I would address the details in executive session.
I would agree with what John just said. It's not, we can't go out and ask, say, the city of Bellingham, what's your budget for this? I do think that, well, two things. One, quickly, the $300,000 is what we've got budgeted this year. That could be more than that. We'll know by July, August of this year what we should look at for 2023 and beyond. The other is I've been in discussion with the Ag Water Board. I think that their number is going to be pretty close to that just for the Ag Water Board. But I don't think that we can expect to say what's normal, who's doing what, and compare it as to. The other is that I think we're way ahead of any of the major water consumers in Whatcom County in terms of preparing for the filing. So.
No,
Okay, but
Commissioner Grant, I
yeah,
would just like to add that you've got to make the investment in your legal services that you think are adequate to the task. And it may be that what other people are doing, other organizations are doing, at the end of the day might not be sufficient and might not have been adequate to the task. So, we've got to determine what's right for our customers and kind of move forward on that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't get some benchmarks so we've got an idea, are we in the ballpark? But at the end of the day, we've got to defend our rights as we see adequate, and we're going to do that with best advice of counsel, and obviously with your buy-in, and you'll go along with the whole thing.
And just to echo on one Commissioner Murphy's early statements, the goal being to secure as much of the water right beyond the contracted actual use right, but the paper right to be a solution oriented in the community. That being the goal, that elevates or expands the scope of work and the type of issues that we may have to face from a legal and factual standpoint and be prepared for. So I'll leave it at that.
that's helpful. Is everyone okay moving? I know this is a really important topic. Can we, but I do want to be aware where we're at with time. Is everyone okay moving on to the next goal / strategy? Okay, I'm getting head nods. Jim, take it away.
All
And
right,
and if you want to share your screen again, I can't see it anymore.
really?
I can't. Can other
Oh.
people?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got
Oh,
it.
okay. Maybe it's just me. Hold on a second here. Well, I can see it now. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, so let's move on, and we've got about 30 minutes left in your time allotment today, and we have 5 more strategic goals and strategies to discuss. Number 6 is on defining the PUD's role in advancing clean and renewable local energy. There were 2 strategies: develop a long-term plan to consider the provision of retail, clean and renewable energy throughout the county. And second, to undertake a demonstration project in partnership with the county port and/or PSE. So I would defer to Chris on this one. He's taking the lead. Chris?
So on doing a feasibility study, I had some back of the napkin calculations. I've talked to at least one engineering organization, actually 2, that have given me a ballpark to do a feasibility study. Once an RFP is issued and we've awarded a contract, it should take about 4 or 5 months. So it's a relatively quick process and cost between 60 and 70,000. Now, it's not to say that we don't get different bids than this when we actually put the proposal out, but just that was a budgetary number that was tossed out by a couple of different firms, that this is what you could expect. Those outfits have done feasibility studies in the Northwest for exactly this. So they know what they're talking about in terms of scope. And they also know what they're doing in terms of schedule. So, pending your approval, I would go ahead and write an RFP, get it on the street and get a feasibility study. And remember, the feasibility study has 2 fundamental outcomes: either that it's feasible or that it's infeasible. And not predetermining anything here. And the other thing to think about is that it's very difficult for us to directly do any conservation without having a large customer base on the electric side. So, conservation becomes us being more of a cheerleader without a customer base. So are there any questions about the feasibility study? Okay. On the second piece there, we are going to be putting in the 2023 budget at a minimum, having a small demonstration project here at the utility. We're also going to be working with the county to see if there is something that we can do in partnership with them that's a little bit bigger. Remember that all we can do with any renewable energy right now is offset tier 1 and tier 2 power from Bonneville, which is very, very inexpensive. So, I'm reluctant to propose anything that's utility scale because it would just end up costing more money in the long run. So that being said, I think having a demonstration project that's demonstration project size is the right thing for us to do. And you'll see that in the 2023 budget.
Okay, moving on. Any other questions? And Commission, I just want to reassure you, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to work on both the text, the language, and the content of these. So I just want to remind everybody it's a constant refinement plan as we move forward. Goal number 7 was community outreach. We referred to this a little bit later today, earlier this morning. There were 2 pieces of this that, and Ann was going to take the lead in it. One was redoing the PUD's logo and printed material, website design, outreach efforts. And second strategy was develop a social media program. It addresses a number of topics. And I think the discussion internally was that staff could probably undertake this, might be some minor contracting. And I would ask either Ann or Chris if there's any comments on this.
I'd like to call Ann back to the microphone if she's willing and be our victim.
No. On the PUD's logo, we were just about there. I think it was middle of last summer-ish was when we had revisited the logo and branding process. I'd like to just pick up where we left off on that one. And then to develop a social media program, I've been doing some research on what that's going to take. It'll take some time, but we'll get there.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Any other questions? All right.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Is this something, Ann, that you think that we'll be able to do with our existing staffing, or will we need purchase services, or do you think that we need to hire somebody for this? Or do you know that yet?
We don't know that yet.
You don't know that yet.
We don't know yet. And whether or not we're gonna have to hire somebody on the social media end of it.
It really depends on what we do.
Mhm.
There's.
So there's a lot more to be discussed.
Yeah.
A lot more.
Yeah, and I've got significant experience with this at several different utilities, and the approach really drives the staff you need for it and the support. And yeah, it's just it's a big deal.
Okay, so if we were to move on to number 8, clean industry. There were 2 strategies here. Identify and explore the components of success. Those communities have launched similar industrial clean industry programs. And second was, as part of the implementation of that, is explore a partnership with the port and or county to attract clean industry. And this appeared to be mainly driven by staff time. And Chris, give you an opportunity to comment on this if you'd like.
Yeah, the first thing I'd like to note is that those 2 things are extremely tightly interconnected, almost inseparable. And really they're around what to do at Cherry Point long-term and then how we can support that. Steve Jelk got a meeting together with Delummy and us. We talked to them and heard some really interesting thoughts from at least one member of the tribe on what would be appropriate out of Cherry Point. I think the dilemma that everybody's had in the past is not having buy-in of the Lummi and perhaps the Nooksack on what to do out there, and then not having any kind of a master plan and working with the county on what that would look like. I think that it sounds to me like there's consensus that something around green energy, whether it's hydrogen production, which would be compatible with what's already happening at Cherry Point, or something else around hydrogen or green energy production, and you can think solar panel manufacturing. There's a lot of industries that support green energy that could be encouraged out of Cherry Point. So this one's on me to organize with the county and economic development, the tribes, and the landowners to try and get a group of people together to figure out what it is that'll fit out of Cherry Point and how to encourage and attract that. And I think Steve's been working on this for years off and on, and it's been a tough slog. But for the first time, I think in a long time, it sounds like we got everybody on the same page and kind of wanting to do the same thing. So I can't tell you exactly what success looks like here, other than, when I come to you and say, look, here's a business that looks like they're going to land there, that's success. And my work is going to be to kind of get us there. So that's the high level view of the thing without giving you a lot of detail.
Does that also include, when you talk about Cherry Point, you're also including the Intalco side?
Yes. Yes, that's all part of Cherry Point. Yeah, and BP and Phillips 66 and all of the landowners out there.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Let's move on to goal number 9. Under water supply, there were 2 strategies here. One, to undertake a pilot study to demonstrate new technologies. We had a focus on the ag community. And second was to look at alternatives on sources of water during low flow conditions. And Steve Jilk has taken a look at this. And Steve, I'd refer to you on this one in terms of a little bit more discussion.
They two go really together. I think they have the potential to go together. Both finding what opportunities there are to move water to agricultural needs upriver from our two diversions here in the lower Nooksack, and how best we can accomplish that. The issue around water supply to ag is almost entirely having to do with the impact on flows and streams and how that flow impacts the production of fish. So looking at them really together, I believe that there's a lot of work going on right now with the Watershed Management Board projects referred to earlier. Rebecca is managing a large water supply grant that we're looking at trying to include the entire basin, looking at out of stream needs, but also taking a look at how out of stream needs impact its stream flow. So the outcome of that second phase of that water supply plan will be done this fall, this December. And also there is a Watershed Management Board's drainage-based management planning process that's going on, that's working on 3 pilot sub-basins that are really looking at water quality, water quantity, where is water needed, and where we can get the water. So all I'm saying is that this is really an appropriate opportunity for us to work with agriculture, work with farmers, taking a look at the work that's being done under the water supply plan and the drainage-based management planning work, and then determine what best approaches there are to take to meet those needs. I think the 9.2, the date, the June 21st date may need to be moved out just because of all the other work that's going on. So other than that, I think that if we actually move the June 21st date to closer to the November date, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, got that, Steve. With me while I make some notes here. Thank you, Steve. Any questions on that? We have one more to go.
The only other comment I'd make is that when we talk about water supply to agriculture, it's really critical for us to work with agriculture for them to determine what their needs are and where those needs are that need to be met in order to determine what the pilot study would how we define that pilot study. So.
Commissioner, do you have?
Yeah, so the title here, water supply, I'm just wondering maybe it would be helpful on this as well as the other strategic goal, I think it was 5, to say WIRA 1 in parentheses. I don't know. It just occurred to me.
I think that'd be
So
appropriate.
it's clear. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Then moving on to our last one, community impact analysis. I can cover this one. This was the notion of creating a baseline on what the PUD's economic impact is on the county. Chris and I did discuss this. I had a long discussion with one of the more premier economics firms in the state about doing this. We landed on a budget to do it of about $20,000. It's more than likely going to be less than that, but it's not scoped yet. So this is a more conservative number in the sense that it's a little bit higher. The interesting thing for you to think about and you will have time to do this in the future, is their comment was that the PUD itself, as an entity, as an organization, doesn't have an enormous economic footprint in terms of what you buy and number of employees and, you know, impacts on the housing market and that type of thing. But you have a significant impact when you consider who your customer base is. And their early advice or their early review of it is that it's called a downstream economic impact analysis of what the PUD contributes to the local economy through your customer base. So they were very much aware of that. So there'll be opportunities here throughout the year to develop the scope of work and then fine tune what that budget number looks like. And it's also something too, I'll share with the commission that, you know, it's a, 30, 60 day type of turnaround on a impact analysis like this, because it's all data crunching and the modeling's all set up. So unless, let's see, we have actually one more. And this was the new goal initiative we added, the asset management culture. And this, as I mentioned earlier, this is about first categorizing all your physical assets. And then second strategy was to identify key personnel roles and positions and look at a succession plan. And I think Chris is well versed in this. And Chris, any comments you'd like to make to the commission on this one?
Well, just a real quick description on this, but before I do that, we've got someone down in the chat room, and Mike, I don't know if you could tell us what the person is asking, who they are, and I don't want to leave anybody behind.
It's Dave Olson, and we can read it out loud during the public comment period.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to make sure that we didn't have somebody that had something on our strategic plan.
Yeah, no, thanks
So,
for. Go ahead.
Thank you, John. So asset management is a science and an art all onto its own. And a lot of times it's portrayed as something that's extremely complex and difficult to do in an organization and expensive. And I would say it is none of those things. It's really straightforward. Any utility is in the asset management business, whether they know it or not. That's what utilities do. They install long-term assets and then maintain them essentially to perpetuity. So asset management at the utility is really simple. It's splitting your assets into asset classes. Again, that sounds complicated. It's not. Pipes are an asset class. Poles are an asset class. Pumps are an asset class. And then saying, do you want to run these things to failure, or do you want to replace them before they fail? It is literally that simple. Now, it turns out that this utility has already done that for most of its large asset classes. All I'm proposing to do is gather all that information together and make it so that, as time goes on and people ultimately come and go from the organization, that we've got a plan that feeds directly into our budget that pays attention to our assets and make sure we can continue to maintain them in the state that they are. The second piece of that is, and a lot of organizations say this and they never do it, our people are so important to everything we do. And we have got to have the same care for them that we do for all of our physical assets. We've got to look at what they know, how long they've been with the organization, and what might happen if we need to replace them. And in addition to that, we've got to look at folks that are here and they're going to be here for a long time. What additional education and training do we need for those individuals so that they can better do their job for the district? So that's literally what this is. It's developing, gathering the asset planning information for our hard assets, putting together a succession plan for our people, and then putting together developmental plans that help guide educating people. And that's really what this is. It's not that difficult. End of year this year is not a problem. And I would be happy to discuss this with anybody.
Okay.
Hey, Jim, it looks like we're okay.
I think we're okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. So we have about 10 minutes to go on your schedule. And the next portion of our program, we had to discuss mission, vision, and values. And I'd like to suggest that I moved through these and to give you more of an update on these and to ask some very direct questions about this to get the commission sense and the staff on these without going into a tremendous amount of detail. And then as we get towards the end of the presentation in a few minutes, we can talk about the next steps are and what we can do, we being Chris and I, to prepare for the next meeting in June. So if that's okay with the commission, let me walk through this piece fairly quickly. And we want to get to the community engagement plan or plan approach. So the first one on the mission statement is that what you see here on the screen, these keywords and ideas came from the questionnaires that you've had for the last couple of weeks from both staff and commission. But the fundamental question about the mission statement is, does the current mission statement resonate? Does it make sense to the commission and to the community? And rather than go into, because of the sake of time today, rather than go into all these keywords, I think we can take these, prepare some ideas for you to consider at your meeting in June, which is the next step, and start to fine tune this. I would ask the commission though, not in terms of substance, but the feelings about, does the current mission statement need to be reworked at all, or does it make sense? And hopefully you can read that on the big screen in the chambers. So I would ask the commission that, can you read it okay in the chambers?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't currently reflect broadband, but
Yeah.
and it's clear that we're going to be in the very soon.
Okay.
It is, yeah. But in the front end of the statement, it says water and energy. So we could just generalize it to say utility services. But anyway,
Okay.
somehow or another, just to clean up the language there.
All right. Well, any other comments? Let me move on. I'm being mindful of time. The next one on vision statement, and this is what the world looks like when the PUD is successful in the future. You currently don't have a vision statement. I think the question is, a lot of organizations don't have a vision statement in their strategic plan. So the question I have for you is, does the PUD want to have a vision statement? We had one idea brought forward during the questionnaire that is interesting, and I'll just for food for future thought for you, an idea that the vision would be, in the future, our community will be more populous, water will be less abundant, and access will become contentious. Weather will be less predictable and more extreme, and the PUD will be the preferred provider of water and electric services for Whatcom County, delivering economic, dependable, sustainable, and resilient service for our customers' benefit. And we're not asking to wordsmith that, but just food for thought, and I'll work with Ann to get these to you. And before the commission responds to that, I want to show you one other thing very briefly. Is vision statements are like this one that is here at the bottom end of the screen. The other way that some organizations have done this is that they talk about specific things that might happen in the future. And I just grabbed this one from the Port of Benton in Eastern Washington. And I think you've seen this before, but this is a sample and just a reminder. This was done in 2020, this plan. So they looked ahead 10 years and said, these are the kinds of things that might actually be happening in our community because of our work. They're loosely connected to their goals and strategies, but they went out on a limb and really said, this is how we think the world. It's very visionary going forward. And it makes a lot of people nervous too, I'll tell you that. So the question for the commission to contemplate is, excuse me, do you want to have a vision statement? And does it look something on the order of a statement like this idea? Or would you want to be start making some statements like on this Port of Benton sample document?
Can you go to the previous slide one more time, Jim?
Yep. And these were
So
great
the
comments that came in, by the way.
statement on the bottom
Uh-huh.
would be the outcome. In the future, our community will be versus the statements on the other slide.
Yeah, there's two ways of doing it, and neither way is right. One is, just a one sentence description of what the future looks like when you're successful, like this idea on this page makes a run at. The other way to do it is say, here's 5, 10 things that, very practical things that might happen in the next 5 years or 10 years, whatever our distance is. And that sort of also describes the vision of the future. So there's two ways to do it, or the third way is you don't have a vision statement at all, which is fairly common. We looked at, I think last meeting, we looked at some vision statements of other organizations, but so I guess the question of the commission is, do you want one? Is it like the one on this one, or is it a list of things that might happen in the community? And they're both really to communicate to your target audiences, your customers in the community, what you're, as an organization, what you're striving to accomplish and how you're going to change the world.
So Jim, we're going to get this out to the commissioners, and
Yes,
I would suggest that we give them,
Yeah.
give them a little time just to, think about it, and then respond back, and then you and I can figure out, is the sense we want to have one? If we have it, what form would it be? And then we can start wordsmithing stuff that they can respond to.
Yep, makes sense. So in that same vein, then, one of the questions is on values, and we'll get this out to you as well. And this is a little bit, the one comment we got back in the last few weeks was, we got a lot of values here, and they kind of get lost. They're all important, but they sort of get lost. So these values really are to describe how you do your work. And I think the simplest way to look at it, and this was in the questionnaire, is who do you value? And the common ones that came back were the citizens, community, and customers and future customers. And what do you value? You can see the list here of stability, innovation, responsiveness, and focus on the future. I would suggest, as Chris mentioned, that we give a stab at incorporating all of this with what you currently have, and make some recommendations and suggestions to you on values, because I think we have enough at this point to be pretty close to what the commission is going to want to consider. So Commissioner Grant, if that makes sense, should we just move on then?
Yeah, I think given our time constraints, let's keep moving and talk about next steps for how we're going to bring all this together.
Okay. So we just have a couple more slides. Our next meeting is scheduled for June the 14th. And why that long? Well, because we've got some work to do, and we're also accommodating schedules, and we've landed on the next two meetings being June 14th and June 28th. And I'll come back to those in a minute, but here we wanted to add the community engagement piece. And Chris, I'll let you comment on the two things that you're proposing under the arrow there.
So what I want to do is simply two meetings, one that's focused on our customers, and then one that's open to anybody in the public. And really, these are just listening sessions. We'll get word out, and we'll advertise every way we can figure that makes sense. And I don't know if I'll ask people to RSVP, so we have a sense of how many will show up. My sense is that not too many. This room should probably be okay. I've done these many, many times in the past, and even though you want hundreds of people to show up, you're lucky if half a dozen do. And that being said, I'd be delighted to be surprised on this one. But anyway, so it's two different things. One is the general community, the public, and the other is existing customers, and they may have very different input, and we'll have the strategic plan at that point, so we'll have something to respond to, and then we'll use their input and as appropriate and incorporate that in the final plans that are for late June and early July.
So as you consider that, and I've included those on this slide, and then there's just the final slide and next steps right after this. But essentially, our meeting is on June the 14th. That's been set. In between now and then, I'll work with the staff with Chris to refine the resource questions. We had, by the way, today we had 17 comments made, all great, and we'll get those incorporated. We'll start producing some recommended language around the mission, values, and vision, and come back to the commission in the June 14th with those. Excuse me, we'll get some input from you beforehand. And I'm given our schedule to complete this by mid-July. I think at that meeting, we are going to want to also review an outline of the plan so you can see what it looks like and what the content starts to take, how it starts to take shape. There's a number of things that are what I call background material, like an introduction. Will there be a letter from the GM or from the commission or from both? You know, do we want to include things like history? Those will get folded into that outline, and we can make some, they're more strategic decisions about content. So on June 14th, we should have a pretty good sense of what the plan is coming to look like. And then you'll have an opportunity, as Chris mentioned, to get some input from folks, and then come back on the 28th and see if we're not pretty close to having the plan finalized. And then, of course, even after that, we're not projecting to approve it until July the 12th. And in that time period, in mid-June to July 12th, we'll start doing the design and layout and get the look of what the plan looks like. And all that is designed to be in advance of your budget deliberations for fiscal year 2023 that'll start this summer. So that's the overall schedule. And Chris and I have coordinated on what happens in this period in between. We've got quite a bit of work to do, but we've allowed ample opportunity to do that. And then at the next meeting, we'll come back on, I mentioned, on goals, strategies, and tactics, the drafts of the mission, values, and vision, and be able to talk about a preliminary plan outline and have enough at that point that you can take it out to these groups that Chris will organize and get some preliminary input back. So if that schedule still makes sense, I think we're on track to get that done. We're getting pretty close, Commission. We're, you know, as I said, we had, I think, 17 comments today, but I think we're just getting more clarity and refining. So I think we're in pretty good shape.
Jim, so just to be clear here about what the commission will be doing between now and June 14th, will you be following up with us again to continue working on the mission, values, and vision so that we're a little bit closer on June 14th and can have a longer discussion about that in that meeting? Am I capturing that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. And you know, and the other thing too, this is, I mean, this is messy work in one sense, doing the strategic work, and as a group, it's hard to do. And then you come down to wordsmithing, it gets even a little bit more complicated, but it evolves over time. So I think our next step, and I'll coordinate with Chris on this, is to get out some ideas on mission, vision, and values to the commission. So you've got something pretty firm to react to well in advance of the June 14th meeting. If that makes sense, Chris, we can get that out there, and then we can further refine that on your comments and roll
Yeah.
on the 14th.
Okay.
Yeah, we might even want to consider, Jim, having an intermediate meeting, not a scheduled meeting, but a new special called meeting just on mission, vision, values, maybe late May. Let me look into that.
Right, or I'd also be open to, if it makes sense, to just have individual consultations with Jim too, whichever works best.
Well, the individual consultations are great for getting, you know, the opinions, but we can't get you guys to react to each other's opinions outside of a called meeting.
Yeah, right.
So And that's really the important thing, especially if there's something that you want done that's different than what Commissioner Grant wants done for a
Sure,
particular
sure.
item.
Yeah, I'd be open either way.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and do as Jim suggested and get information out to you as early as we can. And if the reactions are consistent and largely in alignment, the 14th may be the perfect time to do it. And if not, if we're getting a lot of different input from different folks, we may want to try and schedule an intermediate meeting in addition to our normal scheduled meetings just for this.
Okay.
And Commissioner, I will tell you, having done many of these, this is a pretty normal process to go through because it's like I said, it's complicated and you're trying to come to a consensus, but this is the process of strategic planning and this is the heavy lifting in that. So compliments to you for sticking with it, and you'll get the best possible plan you can out of this process. So.
Great. Well, if we need to have a special meeting, I think that's time well spent before June 14th. So let's just continue communicating about that. And I think that the timeline looks good to me. Otherwise, other commissioners, do you have any other questions or comments on this process and our next steps?
I have none.
Okay. All right. Well, hearing none, I just wanted to say thank you, Jim, for all your hard work on this.
Sure.
And Chris and all the staff that I know contributed to the plan since our last meeting. And with that, how's everybody doing? Should we move on to general manager report? Or is anybody needing a break? Well, okay.
I can hang it out. we'll have a break before executive session anyway. So.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to check in since we're all, bye, Jim. Okay, Chris, general manager report.
So first, I want to update all of the commissioners and the general public on the Blue Wolf effort. That's the organization that's looking to purchase and restart the Intelco project. I met with representatives of Blue Wolf and BPA down in Portland last week, and the purpose of that meeting was to try and sound out BPA, get options from them around direct service industry or DSI rates and or anything else they could do. And Bonneville was pretty adamant that they're not looking for any DSI type rates. We asked them to consider putting together a market basket of forward purchases and something that would not be just spot purchases, but actual block and slice purchases for product available on the market. They said they would do that, but there were other issues involved with preference customers would have a right of first refusal on any market basket they brought up before it was offered to a DSI type customer. So there's issues around that. So leaving that meeting, I wasn't hopeful that we were going to get a lot of help from Bonneville. What I continued to hear from Blue Wolf was that they are dedicated to this project, that they think it'd be great for Whatcom County, Washington, and the United States of America. And I agree with that. I think it's a great project. Aside from helping them through the issue with Bonneville, I connected them up with the Energy Authority, TEA, who also does independent market purchases. Blue Wolf had been kind of premising their entire approach on what they saw in market forwards. And those are spot prices. And that's different than if you go into the market and buy a 5-year round the clock contract for a certain amount of power at a certain location. And so I think that Blue Wolf was going to go independently and try and see if that is something they could do to, open the plant, make it work. Other than that, I haven't heard anything back. Everybody's gone radio silent. I don't know if that's good news or bad, but I'll be touching bases with Mike and Dave at Blue Wolf here later this week and to see if there's anything else we can do to help.
So when you talk to them, something that you could pass on is that they should consider talking to Energy Northwest. That's for them to do. We certainly, being on the board, can facilitate that, but
Does
I'm sure that-
Energy Northwest have energy or capacity to sell?
They-
Beyond what's already under contract?
they have more than once have communicated that they want to be seen as a solutions provider for additional demand for industrial facilities. Now, they are focused like BPA is on the public parking.
Okay. Yeah.
I
and-
don't know if
and-
Mike wants to add
No,
anything.
no,
to that.
you're right. It's a resource to go to. I know that Columbia is all being contracted, but I think their hydro and other things are too, but they want to be a problem solver, so it is a place to go.
And there's
Okay.
talk of modulars, I mean,
Yeah.
I know that, so, I mean, if the
Yeah.
timeline that works, but,
Yeah, they want power starting this summer.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No, and I did talk to him about modular nukes, but that was a more long-term, what do you do after the 5-year
Mhm.
contract rolls off?
Mhm.
And they were looking for green solutions out beyond
Well,
5 years.
Energy Northwest has proposed solar farms, in which they've got a lot of land.
Yeah,
And,
and again, I think that Blue Wolf that's right up their alley. That's exactly what they're looking for beyond the 5 years.
So yeah, Energy Northwest manages a lot of land in places that are sunnier than Whatcom County. But, they are connected to the same BPA transmission lines that Intalco rely on. It's intermittent, and that's a huge
It's an issue.
issue. But Blue Wolf is a thermal customer, so it's possible that some combination of thermal batteries, which I love to talk about, which I know aren't commercial yet, but there might be some possibilities. One could argue an aluminum smelter is a thermal battery. But anyway,
Okay, thank you.
I think Energy Northwest would at least be glad to have that conversation. Greg
Alright.
Cullen.
I will make sure, Greg Cullen.
Yeah.
I will make sure that they know that.
I could send a quick email after the meeting.
Please do.
Yeah, I'll
That'd
just-
be great. Second thing I want to talk about is we have a public records request from Mr. Humphreys. And just to let you guys know, the first tranche has gone out on that, and the second tranche is due Mid-May, and then
Final by November.
and
We'll
so,
do installments.
so yeah, at least 2 more installments, and the cost so far to satisfy this request is a little over $7,000 and climbing. So not a cheap request to answer. Third topic, third item, we're starting to, this summer, we're going to enter into negotiations with BPA on what the post-2028 contract should look like. We're represented by PPC, NRU, and others, kind of represented 6 Ways to Sunday. We agree with their approaches, and so anyway, just to let you guys know that that's starting, and it's going to happen. And then last but not least, Commissioner Grant was on the Energy Committee for WAPUDA. They had a basic question, where do we go in terms of what's important for lobbying in the future? And Commissioner Grant and I had a bit of a back and forth on the thing, and our final question was, well, okay, that's fine. Even if we agree, what about Commissioner Murphy and Commissioner Deshmani? So sent that over to you, have a thought on what to do with that. And if we have to, we can have a discussion in our next commission meeting. But there's no way, I mean, the topic that's raised is more complex than we want to wrestle with first blush here. So I'd urge you to read the comments and kind of think about it before we have the discussion. Commissioner Grant, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think, Chris, you and I should just talk before our next meeting about I think potentially having that be its own agenda item would be useful, but let's just figure out how we're going to have a
Okay.
discussion about that, and then I'll also know more after the WAPUDA meeting on Thursday about what their next steps are on the feedback that they're getting from all the PUDs and how we want to respond as an organization. Yeah, thanks.
Super. And that's the end of my report. Does anybody have any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Moving on to commissioner reports. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Great.
So let's see, I think I shared about the water committee. The watershed management board meeting, I think, is now scheduled for late April. So I'll be attending that. And there's also an effort to, I think it's been scheduled now. The EDI board meeting is now scheduled. And then, as part of my ongoing effort to understand how we serve the community, I've had meetings with Andrew and Chris on broadband. This coming week, for me, a big focus is the first time attending WAPUDA meetings in person. I'm looking forward to that. I don't know if any of you either of you commissioners are attending, or if we have other staff attending WAPUDA meetings this week in person.
I was, but I had to cancel due to a family
Okay.
things.
I guess I should bring up, are there any meetings that we'd like to cover for each other at the WAPUDA meetings?
For me, what would be in doctor's appointments, but it's not the same hour that I need to be on the governance nor the.
Okay, so you're fine.
So I can make both, but if things.
Well, if
don't
I'm
work
there,
out right
assuming I'm there
Friday,
physically,
Yeah.
what else am I gonna do? So
attend them and.
I'll attend. Yeah.
I was planning to go in person. I'm gonna have to just see how I'm feeling, but no matter what, I'll be there either virtually or in person.
Other than that, no, I don't really have a lot to report. That's it for me.
For me, I met with Steve dealing with water issues in the county and going over some of our future plans. So we spent good time on that. Met with Chris regarding water issues and other issues. I had a chance to sit with Energy Northwest on they had a class on uranium 235. It's the uranium they purchase. Gave the board a little education on uranium, and besides that, I'm going to be, if it's okay with the board, attend the Whatcom Farmers Expo that's coming up 23rd of April at the Northwest County Fairs. Otherwise, that's
Yeah, and that the exhibit that we helped fund,
Yeah.
Commissioner Murphy, I think I would also like to attend that and see how the exhibit we funded
if you didn't get
is
it.
developing. Yeah, I'll just put it in my calendar, the 23rd. Because when we the three of us had an opportunity to get a really brief exposure to that exhibit with the PUD Help Fund, but I didn't really spend any time last year. I think it was last year, right? Was it last year or 2 years ago?
I think it was last year.
Was it last year? I don't remember. Anyway,
It was last year.
I think I'd like to go and look at our exhibit, spend time and actually, I mean, not our exhibit. No, that's bold. But the exhibit that we helped fund. So.
I have just a quick update. It sounds like both of you are done. I had, we decided that we would not have commissioners from the port and the PUD on the broadband steering committee anymore. But I have had a meeting with Michael Shepard since then, just to kind of stay synced up and keep communication between the two commissions going on broadband. Have had a few check-ins with Chris, and have shared things about prep for both the telecom and energy WAPUTA meetings. And then I also did a training with Jurassic Parliament on chairing commission and council meetings, and I thought it was really helpful. And she, the woman that facilitated, shared her slide deck, and I'll forward it to Chris and have him email it to both of you, because it was educational for me, and I thought maybe you two would want to click through it.
I love her.
She's great. It's hard to make parliamentary procedure exciting, but she does it. And then, like I said, I fingers crossed I can go to the WAPUTA meetings in person. I just want to make a good call in terms of how I'm feeling. So that's it for me. So the next item on our agenda is executive session. Oh, sorry, no, the next item on our agenda is public comment. And so I do know that we have, okay, we've got one hand up from Mike Kaufman, who is online. And so Mike McComber, can you help upgrade him to a panelist so he can speak?
Yeah, I allowed him to speak. We don't need to upgrade him to
Mike,
panelist, but we can allow him to speak.
Great. Mike, welcome.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Excellent. My internet has not dropped off for the first time like ever. Thank you. Mike Kaufman here. And I'd like to call the PUD's attention and the public's attention to the comprehensive plan. Chapter 5 has the utility plan in it. I'm one of the major architects of this plan, as it's gone through almost 32 years of existence. And I'd say, to me, the comprehensive plan is an expression of the community's vision, the wants, their goals, policies, when you read through it. It started in the 90s when we passed an electric initiative on high voltage tension lines. During that time, eminent domain was raised. It's kind of where the term eminent domain kind of exists in language, although it's been stripped out. In the early 2000s, we had another committee that I chaired, and it dealt with pipelines. It also dealt with franchise agreements, is where we learned about that. And there's a direct statement in there on how to deal with that from a community's point of view. Lots been stripped out through the time, certainly with the Cherry Point work that's been done, but it does exist. What's not in the plan is any language on the internet, or broadband as we're calling it, climate change, which many people are interested in, and types of clean energy, which we're talking about. There's no comment about the economy and jobs as they relate to utilities, again, that we've talked about here even today. And so, what is that utility plan? And I believe it really needs to be upgraded. It needs new emphasis from the public. I'll go back to last meeting that you had where Manager Chris made suggestions, and even today, about asking, people's participation and community outreach. And I believe we, the people, myself and others, as you mentioned, maybe people that come to this meeting, should use the comprehensive plan as the platform from which to talk from. And it both talks about water, and then it talks about, utility energy stuff in it. So it's a very important place, I think, to start from. And we can maybe work alongside the PUD's strategic plan, and other government agencies in that. And One of the things the PUD possibly could adopt is, we have our comprehensive plan vision as we move through that. The PUD has its strategic plan and it moves, and the PUD could help implement the goals of the comprehensive plan that the people could create. And I would like to invite participants to contact me about my concept of approach. I could show up at the next meeting now that the doors are open, and if you'd like to meet at that time, or I could leave my number if appropriate with the secretary, and we could work out a way that interested parties could reach me and we could help. I'm interested in starting this discussion. So that's kind of what I have to say at this moment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, if you'd like to share your contact information, all of the commissioners' email addresses are listed on our website, and I can put that link in the chat for you too. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
It doesn't look like we have any other hands up. Dave Olson did leave a comment in the chat, but he's also still online. Dave, do you want to make a public comment, or do you want me to read the public comment you left before?
Just go ahead and read that. That'll be for brevity.
Great. So hi all. Chris hit the nail on the head, emphasis added regarding broad Whatcom County, general public, private water systems, well owners, farmers, etc. Unawareness, ignorance for what is potentially coming with adjudication and the impacts. The Department of Ecology is not likely to speak to potential impacts with clarity of potential / likely outcomes. The default of parties is to push the burden and liabilities to others, typically ecology, by taking a conservative, hopeful, optimistic approach rather than reality / pragmatic approach. Unfortunately, the PUD needs to take a sterile, facilitating approach for PR and liability issues and risks. How do you inform / prepare the community for what is about to come based on risk, reality, and management?
Thank you.
Thank you. And then, Anne, do we have anyone in the conference room that would like to make a public comment?
We have Rick Miracle, who would love to come up to the mic.
Welcome, Rick.
Thanks, and I'm glad that we're able to be back in person again. Very nice. In listening to the broadband discussion, I couldn't help but think of myself and my own internet experience. I mean, at home, I can watch live TV events like NFL football games. I can do Zoom. We do video chats with family. I can do all of my banking financial stuff online, email, surf the internet, whatever I need to do without problem. However, in light of what's currently considered standard, my internet is abysmal. It's 10 down, 1 up. And yet I can do everything that I need to do, including all of these things, without a problem. So I'm thinking that while 100 down, 10, 20 up would be nice, for the vast majority of internet users in Whatcom County, it's probably not necessary at all. And so I think in going forward and looking at what it is you are proposing to do and where you're wanting to go with broadband, you need to keep that in mind, that you don't wind up trying to build a system that far outstrips what the vast majority of people really need and want. And in that line, your emphasis on broadband should be basically unserved people. Those are the ones you need to concentrate on,
and not necessarily so much on people like me that are, quote, underserved.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
We do have another hand in the audience. Carol?
I too want to say thank you. From experience, I think government works much better when people have a chance to interact face to face, spirit to spirit. And I want to thank the new general manager because he answered a question before I have written down. I wanted to know about the progress at Cherry Point, because so many times, as I shared at the PUD meetings, I was frustrated because the PUD was never mentioned in the long commission meetings and the many county council meetings. It was like the PUD was not there. And it was one of, well, the Cherry Point thing went on for years. And we were there at the first meeting when it was declared an emergency. But I really appreciate being able to see the new general manager and to meet you. And I appreciate your leadership and your style this first meeting that I've observed. And I just wish you all the best here in our community.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other hands up?
Not that I see.
Okay, great. Well, seeing no other hands, we will close public comment. And the next item on our agenda is an executive session. And John, you do you still think 45 minutes is?
No, I think more like 20 minutes.
Okay.
20 minutes is most likely, and depends on wordsmithing, but which I'm hoping to avoid. And if you don't have the email that I sent out last week with the attachments, I'll make copies for those here in the room.
I wouldn't mind a copy.
So message Christine, if you can pull up that email I sent last week.
Yes, I can pull it up. And should we take a 5-minute break before we move into executive session?
That would be a good idea because we
Right.
have to do some.
Because we have to change. Yes. Okay. So is why don't we reconvene then? Is 5 minutes enough time?
It should be.
I think so,
Okay.
it should be.
Okay,
Hey,
so
one thing I do wanna
10:45, 10:46. And I did just well, but we can say this before we adjourn too, but I want to just say thank you again to the technology team for making everything happen with the meeting today. So let's take a break before our executive session and meet back at 10:45.
Hi, Christine.
Hi. So are we back in the meeting?
You are back in the meeting and we do have a few attendees. So I don't know if, are you just basically going to close it out?
I'm just closing the meeting. Yeah. So
Okay.
we just completed an executive session. There was no action. And so thank you all for joining the Whatcom County Public Utility District Commission meeting. The meeting is closed.
Thank you.